Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats.
You know, the immigrant experience is unique and different for everyone. And guess what? If you're within the sound of my voice, that must mean you're in the seats with once more. As always, my name is Dave Voigt, and I'm the host of this podcast, where we sit down with a wide-ranging variety of entertainment industry professionals and we pick their brain about current projects, state of the industry, how they got started, and so very much more in a light and in a conversational fashion. And you know, if you like how we do things around here, I'm going to assume that you do, because, I mean, let's face it, you're listening right now. If you do, or if you are, subscribe. Hit that subscribe button, give us the old thumbs up, the like, 5-star rating on the podcast provider of choice. We're available pretty much everywhere, places like Apple, Amazon, Spotify, Google, and plus we archive every single one of our episodes over at our In the Seats YouTube channel. So if you can give us a like and subscribe there as well, we would absolutely appreciate it. Also, don't hesitate to check us out on social media. We're on the Facebook, we're on the Twitter, we're on the Instagram, we're on the TikTok, we're on the Letterboxd, and I even think we're on the Tumblr for all sorts of fun updates. And finally, and I do dare say most importantly, please pay us a visit over at intheseats.ca for all the latest and greatest from the world of film, television, basically the moving image at large. Because guess what? If we love to watch it and write about it and talk about it, we love it even more when you come by and read about it and listen about it. So do us a kindness and pay us a visit. On this episode, we got a new one that is opening at the TIFF Bell Lightbox as we speak. And it is from a Toronto Canadian Colombian director by the name of Lina Rodriguez, who is a friend and friend of the show, and her film is called So Much Tenderness. It's the story of a woman who fled Colombia after her husband was murdered. She's an environmental lawyer, and she's rebuilding her life in Toronto with a very fiery daughter, but things come about and she runs the risk of losing everything that she's tried to rebuild when the traumas of her past surface in her present. Like I said, it is from writer-director Lina Rodriguez, who, like I said, is a friend of the show. We know and love her well. And I mean, this is really a tender and really beautiful and really interesting film that allows us to sort of appreciate the quiet moments and the beats and not be hit over the head with any kind of political statement or issue around the immigrant experience and all that kind of stuff. It's a very gentle, but it's a very beautiful film. Starring Noëlle Schönwald, who is just fantastic in it, and there's a few familiar faces for you Canadian indie fans in there as well. But we had the unique pleasure of sitting down and talking with Lina about the origin of the story and how it bore out of her other work, and so very much more. But head down to the TIFF Bell Lightbox this weekend to check out a genuine piece of Canadian cinema. It's called So Much Tenderness by writer-director Lina Rodriguez. But first, enjoy our talk with Lina, because between you and me, it's a darn good one. All right, well, Lina, obviously, I mean, just first off, I mean, again, thank you so much for the time today. I mean, congrats again on the movie. I thought it was fantastic.
Thanks so much for watching, Dave.
Always. Now, I mean, walk me through sort of the origin of wanting to tell this story.
I've been in Canada for a long time, and my first two films were in Colombia, as you know, like spoken Spanish. So my father-in-law asked me once, why didn't I make films in Canada? He's like, why don't you make films in Canada? What's wrong with Canada? And he was right. I mean, I was like, yeah, I've been here for a long time. So I started thinking about what it felt to be in Canada. And although it's a feeling that I have every day, I was just like, yeah, I think there's something about being here that is not complete. It's not like finished. It's like there's like this sort of like easiness. It's not always difficult. Like I came here with the privilege of wanting to leave Colombia. I didn't have to leave Colombia, but still, you carry things, you gain things, you lose things. You're constantly learning new things. You're constantly realizing that you don't know a lot of things. Like when people make jokes, I'm still sometimes like, I don't really get it. So I started thinking about what that felt like. And I wanted to make a film that would, like sort of touch upon this feeling of being in this liminal space where you're here, but somewhere else, where you carry things with you, where the past is with you, where the people who you've lost are with you. the people who maybe have hurt you or with you is like, and I don't think that's unique to immigrants, obviously, but I think I wanted to look at what that feels like to this character and what it's felt to me to be here, but to constantly sort of be fragmented into the past and into a different space, emotionally and geographically.
No, for sure. And I mean, at least from my perspective, something I really appreciated about this is that it's not the kind of story that's kind of hitting us over the head with those moments. I kind of felt the tension of sort of the uncertainty in the quieter moments. And to me, that made it resonate sort of all the much more. I mean, for you, how important was it to sort of, I guess, maybe tell the story sort of in between the words, if that's the right way to put it?
No, I mean, thank you for saying that. I think, you know, I think this is true of just in life. When you give time to time, but you also give space to space,
right?
It's like there's just a different engagement with the moment. And I think sometimes we're always rushing, or like we're always trying to find a way to understand everything or to know what something is. But sometimes things just take time. And I think that happens. Like sometimes we're speaking and you're saying something, but the gap between what you say, what you think, and what you do, it's always. So I like paying attention. I think, I mean, of course, filmmaking and film allows you to frame, and the frame is a device to look at something and not something else. But because I also like exploring the relationship between sound and image, then, you know, I can ask you to look at something, but to hear something else. And then they'll create a combination of things that will take you personally somewhere else, depending on who you are. So just giving space to people to make connections between things and between sound and image that would come from what the film proposes, but would also give enough room for people to not have to, like listen to someone talk all the time, or listen to someone talk all the time, but perhaps it is but about what they're saying, but also about how they're saying it. And then you start paying attention, I think, to things in a different way when you have time to pay attention.
Oh, no, exactly. Now, I mean, I guess my next question is just like, talk to me about just finding Noëlle, because I mean, again, it's one of those performances where if you guys aren't entirely in sync and there isn't this sort of understanding of the material, it's not going to work.
I mean, it was the first time I did auditions and gave the role to someone who I didn't meet in person, but it was COVID. It was 2021, 2022, I can't even remember. So I had a casting director for the first time, because I've always done the auditions myself in Colombian. It's the first person really that I've found that works in a similar way to me, in the sense that he's not looking at performers, I don't know, in this traditional way. They send you a headshot and then you just like see them act.
Right.
It's about trying to pay attention to how people move, the cadence of people's speech, but also what people carry with them, and like what their faces show and they don't show. And anyway, like just like this different type of information that it's not really in a reel or really in an audition in this overt way or in a headshot. So the Santiago is his name. He's done casting for other Colombian films. So I talked to a friend who made a film with a main character in a similar demographic to Aurora. So I talked to him and he said, you should work with Santi. So I met with him, and so he brought different options for actresses. And then we did, so instead of doing like a large audition, because he had already done auditions for this other role, which was not the same, but it was similar demo, he was able to give me like a pared down sort of set of options. And from there, we auditioned some people. And from there, Noëlle came. And then from there, I did like a callback with Noëlle. And then after that, and then at the same time, we were auditioning for Lucia here. And then we did like I don't even know if it's chemistry. We did like a rehearsal on Zoom with both of them, because I just wanted to see how they would be, even if we couldn't be in the same place. And it was really interesting. So, I mean, and you're right. I mean, if without Noëlle, that film, it would be really difficult. I love that about filmmaking. You write something and you have like all of this desire and all of this wishing, but obviously it won't be something until it's embodied by someone. And I really try to give room for that someone to fill it in, instead of making those people be who I want them to be. So it's like a give and take. But I do remember that one of the things that I had about the Aurora character, I was like, it has to be someone who, when they're light and they smile, it's like so bright. But then also the kind of pain that they have in their face when they show that, it's the opposite. And like, and I think Noëlle is like, it's incredible. Like in different scenes, she looks like a different person. Like and it's the same face, and she's not doing much. She's just going through things. It's not that she's even saying much sometimes. Yeah.
No, we see it in the eyes. No, absolutely. Now, I mean, I'm curious, did this spin out of your previous documentary piece? Because they feel like such perfect companion pieces.
Yeah, they're like little sisters, so maybe they're like cousins or something. No, thanks for noticing that. So what happened is that I was writing So Much Tenderness, and I met Claudia, and I asked Claudia to give me feedback on the So Much Tenderness script. And then out of that relationship, I ended up making Mis Dos Voces.
Mm.
And that's how and then of course when I keep writing So Much Tenderness, I was like, oh, I think Claudia should be Claudia, or at least a version of Claudia in the film. So that's how Claudia ended up in the film. And Marinella, for example, who, as you know, she's in Mis Dos Voces, I wanted her to be part of the film somehow, so she was working with the costume designer, with Mara, because there was a lot of aspects of like Colombianness, I guess, that I thought were important. So Marina worked with Mara in some of that, and so she was bored. And she also has like a small extra appearance in one of the last scenes. She's there with her daughter. I mean, it's very small, and I also wanted Anna to be in it, but Anna is a very busy woman, so yeah, we couldn't make it work. But I would have loved for the three of them to be somewhere in the film, just because they're definitely like cousins.
Well, and I mean, it's one of those things where, I mean, having, because we know each other, I mean, and just seeing this film and just seeing the progression of the work, I have to admit that I smiled a little bit when I saw Kazakh and Dara in the car, and I'm like, oh my God, they put Lina in the trunk and they're driving her into the country. Like, was that sort of it almost from your perspective, sort of wanting to sort of embrace your Canadian side in terms of being a filmmaker? Because I mean, it felt like a bit of an inside joke almost in many ways.
It wasn't. I never thought about it, but maybe with Cass and Dara smuggling me into Canada, maybe I'll finally become a Canadian filmmaker. Who knows? Maybe. I mean, Dara was the only person who I didn't audition. I really thought of her right away, and I feel like, I mean, Dara's an incredible performer, and she's done so many interesting things.
Sure, yeah.
And I felt like this was kind of slightly different, but she could also carry some of these things that she's done. So I asked her to be in the film. She said yes. And when we were trying to figure out who her husband could be, it was her brilliant idea. She said, "What about Cass?" And I was like, "That's really good." But I had to audition him, and she was like, "Are you going to audition him?" I'm like, "Of course." So he was very gracious. I wrote him and I said, like, "Hey, would you audition for a part to be like Dara's husband?" And he did, and he was great, and it was really fun working with both of them. But yeah, maybe they'll make me more Canadian. We'll see.
You are already very Canadian, so don't worry about that.
I don't know about that.
But you know what? I mean, in watching this film, and I mean, in watching your previous work, especially here, it really felt like you've managed to sort of mesh the lines between documentary and narrative. And I mean, I'm kind of curious, is there a preference, or is there sort of a desire from your end as a storyteller to kind of blur the lines a little bit? Because I mean, just looking at your previous work, it's like you're very comfortable sort of on both sides.
Yeah, I mean, those terms, documentary and fiction. I mean, the other thing that they do now is like fiction and nonfiction. I love how it's like fiction can be nonfiction because it's true. I don't know. Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I think probably because of the way that we started making films, because Señorita was a film that I made with no real strong connections with the industry there. Then my mom ended up in the film anyway, and all of this story that you already know, that my dad did production with Brad. And I think out of maybe this kind of like production model of like, being creative with the resources that you have, just gave me the freedom of not having to just be like, okay, I have to do this. One of the exciting things about So Much Tenderness is that it's the first film that I had written where I didn't know all of the locations, because, Señorita and This Time Tomorrow, I was like, okay, I have to write something where I know maybe where I can shoot it, because, it was low budget. So Much Tenderness is still low budget, but it was, like to think about like crossing a border, I was like, I don't know where we're going to shoot that. But so it's exciting too, to just kind of think about things that you can do. But I think this quote unquote documentary methodology is just, I don't know, I guess it's just the way I feel comfortable working, and maybe it has to do because I really resist this idea of being a director who has to be pleased with my exact idea. So it's a balance, and maybe fiction allows for directors to be, I want like this big fire, and so everybody's like, we have to do what they want. And I think, I don't know, like maybe having this different approach of being like, well, maybe we can use this and put it here, just decentralizes a little bit this sort of like director center thing, where like everything is about this person's vision. And of course this film comes from me, the desire of making comes from me visually, and many things come from me. But I think by allowing space for people who would bring part of their own story in a documentary way,
Yeah.
it just creates holes into my control to just be the film, to be exactly what I want. Because I mean, I never really quite work like that. I don't want to get exactly what I want. Interestingly enough, So Much Tenderness is pretty much the script, and we got telephone funding. It's a script that was submitted, and so it's not that it's far from it, but how it's made and how the people occupy that space. I like giving room, but it's like, it's like you're making a film with people. We're in the same time and space, and we are creating this other reality that is on top of where we are. So they're always in conversation, like it's not separate.
Right. And I mean, you always make very intimate films. And I mean, obviously you're in an independent, no budget space. And I mean, you've cast your mother, like a couple of times. I mean, I'm kind of curious, do you enjoy that intimate space, or are you sort of hoping to transition to a point where maybe you don't have to cast your mother in a movie?
Yeah, no, I think obviously in a sentimental way, like, we're all aging and growing. And I think it's nice to see my mom and make her be part of. I mean, it's not a document that I think it's going to be a legacy for the world to remember. I mean, like, like our life is so short that I don't know. I think life is more about being with people than just being remembered. But to me, it's nice. She's part of it. So it's a way of making them part of it. And it made sense here, and like Brad and I are writing a film that we're going to shoot in Colombia, and we're co-writing, we'll be co-directing. And there's already things from him and me that we just have little things where we're just like, oh, this is interesting, because we like involving the people that we love to be part of it. And but I try to do it in a way that is not just like I'm just gonna like force it, like it just comes naturally. And I don't feel like I have to cast her. Yeah, it's just being natural. I think it's a lovely gesture to kind of like have her close and be part of this crazy adventure of filmmaking.
No, I mean, I'm curious, have you and Brad kind of settled into being on the other side of the aisle when it comes to sort of the festival process? Because I can imagine, especially in the beginning, it would have definitely been a bit of a transition to not sort of be in work mode, or were you kind of happy to be in filmmaker mode?
I mean, I don't know. I think we were always filmmakers when we were working on the other side, I guess. I think for me, working in communications was a way to talk about film and learn about film, and also find ways with people who are interested in this, like you, like how can we find a way that we can open up what film can be, that is not just entertainment, or is not just like pretentious art. Like how can we actually bring people to like share this with us? So for me, and I think for me that's kind of similar to what I want to do with films. I don't want to speak for Brad, but I think Brad was also always a filmmaker. I think he was interested to be a programmer as a way to like be a bridge between the films and the audiences, and it was not about him. So I think it was always like, so it wasn't like, it wasn't like it wasn't really a big transition, because, and we, as we made Señoritas and This Time Tomorrow while working. So we were always making films. So I didn't feel like it was a big, I think we're very grateful that we are, able to make films and do this. Like we love it and we feel grateful and we want to keep doing it. Yeah.
Now, I mean, as we were saying before, I mean, obviously, so what I appreciated about it is just sort of those moments in space and allowing for space to really sort of understand sort of the emotional depth of what's going on with these characters without having to, hit us over the head with it. And I mean, I'm kind of curious for you as a filmmaker and a storyteller, what was the first movie that you saw that had the light bulb go off where you could see sort of those moments in between the words, where you could see the characters still acting and still telling a story, but without having to say the lines?
I mean, I don't know. It's hard to be like the first film.
or a big one for you?
I don't know. I mean, there's like Gentleman, but there's also Godard. Like, I mean, I don't know. More like probably late Godard in a way than early Godard. I mean, there's so many films. And some films that don't really fit the description in a sense, because like Fassbinder, I would say Fassbinder's melodrama in a way maybe does not in a way allow for this, because everything is so heightened, but I just find that in the heightened
Right.
performances and the heightened camera moves and production design, there's something else that like emerges. Yeah, but yeah, I mean, Jan Dillman for sure. Jan Dillman has a lot of space. There's a lot of space, and there's a lot that is communicated through the rhythms of like these women turning on the light, turning it off, like the routine. I have an interest in quotidian things and like how the small things talk about big things. So I mean, I think there's a lot of other films, but maybe Jan Dillman maybe fits the description. I mean, Lucrecia Martel also, like La Ciénaga makes like, I mean, it's also a film that is Baroque. It has a lot of things happening, but I
Sure.
think, but sometimes it's like you see something framed in a strange way and then you hear something that doesn't correspond. So
Yeah.
I think there's also something to that really inspires me.
No, I can definitely see that. And I mean, I'm just to really wrap this up. Uh Obviously you've done the festival run. It's, it's been around the world. It's now about to be released to the masses. I mean, I'm kind of curious, as a filmmaker, as a storyteller, like, can you ultimately let these stories go and move on to the next one, or does a little bit of you hang on to sort of every piece of storytelling that you do?
I mean, I think time is always interesting, right? I think time allows us to, and I don't know, I don't think time passing always makes things feel far. I think we're always moving and everything's always moving. So sometimes things feel close, things feel far. Like we're in Halifax for the Halifax Independent Film Festival, and the film was like the opening event last night. And I didn't stay for the film, but I watched the opening and then I came a little bit before the ending. But the woman who was doing the introduction was an indigenous woman who was super smart. Her name is Fallon, and she was really touched by the film. And I just feel like what's beautiful about making films is to find ways to be with people so we can have a moment of seeing each other and hearing each other. So that was like a beautiful moment of like hearing how she was so emotionally touched by the film that it really touched me and it really made me feel really close to the film. There's other times where I feel like, yeah, I mean, we made this film and it's like, we're making, so I think it's like it moves, it wavers. But I mean, it's a continuum, right? Like a film doesn't really end because this film is going to be sort of related to other films because they're all kind of going through me. And I mean, Brad has been part of my journey. So now we're writing a film together. So that's also a continuation of what we've made together. Now we're gonna make a film together, and that's gonna have pieces. It's like everything's kind of like a bit of a Frankenstein. Everything has a piece of other
Right.
things, and so it's always kind of changing, but it's all sort of connected. So it's hard to feel far away from it, I guess is what I'm saying.
No, I can see that, because I mean, just in watching this film, I mean, it really transported me into a different headspace, which for me, when watching film and watching a story like this is so important. And I mean, it's so vital just to sort of the art form. And I mean, I think you've done a beautiful piece of work here, honestly. And I mean, again, we've known each other for years, but just keep up the good work, honestly.
I mean, it's, Brian and I were talking about this last night, like the closing scene of the, I mean, like, for example, like Brad's father is in the film. He's since then passed away. So every time I see him, it's like this gift to seeing him.
Right.
It's Brad, but obviously it's his dad. So that, like, just the gifts that films have. And the last scene in this film, I have, like I haven't seen the film as a whole in a while, but I have to say, like, the emotional impact of watching this woman look at herself and look at us, like, it hit me. It really moved me every time. Like the scene where Lucia hears that her uncle passed away. Like, I mean, we've all lost people. As an immigrant, I've lost a lot of people here where I can't go back. And it's like this news that you have to stay with. But through COVID, that became even more familiar to most people because we all lost people where you couldn't be there. So, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of tender. And by tender, I mean like, not only like sweet, but like tender is when you go to a doctor and somebody touches you, they touch you and say like, is this still tender? So there's a lot of tender parts of me that are related to the film that I think are going to be tender for a long time. And it has to do with, like losing people, coming from a country that has a long history of violence,
Yeah.
that even if I'm not a direct victim of violence, it is carrying this violence and this history with me. It's something that just doesn't quite go away.
No, and I mean, and being able to share that really speaks to just sort of the importance of sharing it, because I mean, again, it's part of the human experience, and I mean, the violence, either directly or indirectly, will affect all of us, sort of all across the world. And I mean, and that's just one of those things that's so important to understand. Like, one way or another, like if somebody hurts, if somebody's dying, it impacts us all, whether we know it or not.
And absolutely, and in a country that is, complicated idea of like what is Canada, and a place that has a lot of people who have come from places with complicated histories of violence, and let's not forget the complicated history of violence in this land and in this territory, and what's happened here, and how we're still trying to find ways to reconcile with that. So it's all kind of very connected and fresh to how we
No, it's so true.
how we are here and how we live together.
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, Lina, obviously, just thank you so much for the work, and I mean, again, enjoy your trip, and thank you so much for the time today.
Okay, thanks so much, Dave. I really appreciate you taking the time and for your questions.
Always.
Take care.
All right, see you soon. And don't forget to visit our friends over at Bay Street Video for all your DVD, Blu-ray rental, or purchasing needs this summer, as they are still open for curbside and some mailing delivery as well. Over at 1172 Bay Street, Toronto, Ontario, Canada, you can give them a call at 416-964-9088. That's 416-964-9088. Or send them an email at baystreetvideoto@gmail.com for any of your DVD and Blu-ray needs.